What's going on, my fellow gamers? Toxico Cereal here, and welcome back to another Brawl Stars video. Now, it's been a little bit since I've done a video, and that's because I've been having a little bit of a personal problem that I'm not really going to talk about, but that's not going to affect my uploading. It's been about 4 days since I've uploaded a video, and we need to get back on track here because I've been streaming, but let's be real. My channel is mainly Brawl Stars, and we need that Brawl Stars content. And I've done this video like 3 or 4 times now, but we're doing it again because the new Hypercharges just came out, and we're going to be ranking all of the Hypercharges. I don't even know how many there are. There's a lot. So, honestly, I could probably count them right now, because I'm pretty sure there's 14 in a row. So, there looks like there's 49. Yeah, there's 49 Hypercharges. Jesus God, there's so many Hypercharges. But now that the new Hypercharges are out, and I pretty much have gotten a grasp on how I feel about a lot of them and how strong some of them really are compared to the other ones, and shout out to this guy, Gabe BS on X or Twitter for making this amazing layout, because not only does it give me the hypercharged icon, but it also tells me the name of it, which is really nice, and it also just, the formatting on this is beautiful, because it tells you F, useless hypercharge. There's an E tier, which I don't usually use, but I don't know, I just like the format on this one, so I'm just going to use what he gave me instead of changing it. But anyways, without further ado, let's just get into this ranking immediately. So it goes in Brawler rarity order. So starting off with Shelly, double barrel. It's just like an average hypercharge. Like, it doesn't take that long to cycle, and all it does is makes her super wider, but it does increase her DPS. And Shelly she deals a lot of damage. You're gonna pretty much delete it, and it's pretty easy to cycle through multiple. But I would just say it's a pretty average hypercharge. Like, it's just average. Like, I think it's one of the more balanced hypercharges. Next up, we've got Nita's Hypercharge, and Nita's Hypercharge is very strong. It's not, like, completely broken, like some other ones on here, but I'd say for me, it has to be at least in the A tier. The fact that it only takes 2 supers to cycle a Bruce, and it's just a very tanky Bruce that's faster. Like, there's no stopping it. Like, if it gets to you, especially with the stun gadget, you're cooked. You're going to say your prayers, you're done. Next up, you have Colt's Hypercharge. And Colt's Hypercharge it's pretty easy to cycle as well, but it's just all it does is it makes it super wider, which doesn't really help that much. Like, it's better because of the damage, but at the same time, like, you have to hit the Hypercharge still, so I would say it's more of like an inconsistent Hypercharge. It's not completely terrible, but it's not great. Next up, we've got Brock's Hypercharge, and Brock's Hypercharge has gotten 2 buffs now. Both have been to its damage, but overall, it's still just a weak Hypercharge. I don't think it's completely as useless as it was anymore, because it actually can deal some damage. The problem, though, is it's just too predictable in a way, and just, I don't know, I feel like his normal super is just better. Next up, we have Bull's Hypercharge, and Bull has a pretty good Hypercharge. The fact when he supers, he takes a big damage reduction and gets those beautiful stats buff. It's going to allow him to make some plays, and you can easily cycle through multiple Hypercharge supers in a round, and it's pretty easy. So I would put this one above average. It's a decent Hypercharge. Next up, we have El Primo's Hypercharge, Gravity Leap. Nobody talks about this, so I think this one's completely useless, honest to God. Like, it doesn't really change Primo's super, really, at all. All it does is it knocks enemies higher up into the air. That's really it. It doesn't make his super bigger, like they said it would, but it just doesn't. It's the same super, and I think it's terrible. I think it's awful. Easily, in my opinion, a useless Hypercharge. Like, I don't have this Primo Hypercharge. You don't need it. There's just no point. Next up, we've got Barley's Hypercharge, Bottle Up Rage, and this is a pretty good Hypercharge. It does take a decent amount of time to cycle, but it has some insane control of the map and deals a lot of damage. It's pretty much impossible to miss it, and it's made Barley a pretty strong brawler, so I would also put this one up in the A tier. I will arrange. I think Nita's is a little bit better, but Barley is a really good one. Next up, we've got Poco's Hypercharge, Medic's Melody, and I think it only takes 2 supers to cycle. It's kind of underwhelming because the shield isn't that great, and it only benefits if the brawler's not fully HP. It can be okay in some scenarios, but I think it's just a little too inconsistent for me. But it's not completely weak. Next up, we've got Rosa's Hypercharge. Rosa's Hypercharge is a little bit underrated. I don't think we appreciate Rosa's Hypercharge enough. The fact that she gets a movement speed with it and also slows the enemies, you pretty much are guaranteed to kill whoever the heck you get in range to. And it's pretty easy to cycle because Rosa does not take that long to cycle super, especially on a bushy map. She's going to get super almost all the time. She can easily cycle through 2, 3 Hypercharges a game. So for me, I think it's above average now. I definitely think it's grown. And I would say it's a little bit worse than Bull's, but still pretty good. Next up, we have Jesse's Hypercharge, Scrappy 2.0. A very good Hypercharge. It takes no time to cycle. It takes only 1.67 supers to cycle, so you're going to cycle 1, 2, and if you're playing against bad enemies, you're going to have a bunch of these Hypercharge turns in the game. And if you put that thing on a choke point map or spot, or the enemy's not going to be able to take it down, oh boy, you're in trouble. So for me, definitely at least in the B tier, so I'll put it at the top of the B tier. Next up, you have Dynamite's Super, or Dynamite's Hypercharge Boomer. You're throwing out nukes. If good Dynamite players can cycle through 3+ Hypercharges a game, it doesn't take that long to cycle through. And hitting this is just a guaranteed kill, and it could be team wipes almost every single time. Now, I don't think it's completely broken like it used to be, but it's definitely the top of the A tier right now. It's a top meta Hypercharge for sure. Next up, we have Tick's Hypercharge called Headstrong. It's just alright. They buffed its charge rate not too long ago. It used to take 4 supers, which made it was probably like a weak Hypercharge. Now it only takes 2.5, and against bad players who just run into the Tick mines or in a really good matchup, Tick's going to get like 2 to 3 Hypercharges. Now, it doesn't really do that much because the mines are so easy to avoid, but it is good map control, and the Tick head is a lot faster, so it's a lot harder to deal with it, especially if you're a tank. You're going to get hit by this Tick head a lot. So I would say it's just an inconsistent Hypercharge right now. I don't think it's anything worse than that. Next up, we have 8-Bit's Hypercharge, and I kind of overrated this one a little bit. I think I ranked it 3rd on my Hypercharge prediction list. It's okay, but it's also one of those I don't even know how long it takes to cycle, but it's just the way you play 8-Bit is you kind of have his super in the back behind a wall. So the only way you'll get value out of this Hypercharge is if you throw it in the open. Now, there are some cheesy plays you can do with this Hypercharge, but at the same time, I just don't think it's very worthy. So I'm going to put it at the bottom of inconsistent. I don't see much value. Next up, we have Rico's Hypercharge. I really like this Hypercharge because it's basically his mutation super, but it's just a lot of damage. It's pretty easy to hit his shots. It's not very challenging to cycle through. So it's definitely at least an above average Hypercharge. If anything, I'm going to put it in the top meta. I'll put it below Barley's. It's a really strong Hypercharge. Next up, we have Darryl's Hypercharge. I think this Hypercharge is straight up terrible. Like, yes, it does charge automatically, but all it does is it literally just makes him do recoiling rotator, which I guess, yeah, it charges the super, but you have 2 rules. And most of the time, if you cycle onto an opponent, you're going to get majority of your super back anyways. So I don't really see much value in this one. I'm going to put it in weak Hypercharge. I don't think it's completely useless, though. Next up, we have Penny's Hypercharge, one that I very harshly disrespected. I put it 4th. It's easily top 3. Even better than Stu's, arguably. It's a really strong Hypercharge. The only reason I thought it was going to be bad is because it doesn't give an HP buff. But at the same time, if you put it in a spot where there's no thrower on the enemy team and you're never going to get to that turret, that's just 2 balls of fire being shot out very rapidly. That's a lot of map control, and if the enemy gets hit by it, damage. A lot of damage. So I would put it in the top meta Hypercharge. I'll put it right in the center of it right now. This is a really good Hypercharge, one I very harshly disrespected. Next up, we have Jackie's Hypercharge, Seismic Event. It's a pretty good Hypercharge. Now, Jackie has kind of fallen. She kind of goes in and out of the meta in a way, but she has a very good Hypercharge because she gets the speed buff, and then she slows the enemies. She's guaranteed to get a lot of kills, and even team wipes sometime with this Hypercharge. It doesn't take too long to cycle through. It's a really good Hypercharge. It's definitely one of the top meta ones, so I'm going to put it right below Penny's. Next up, we have Em's Hypercharge. I think this one straight up is terrible. Like, I think it takes a while to cycle through anyways, but most of the time, the knockback from summoning her super really doesn't do much because that's what her gadget's for. But I guess if she's out of gadgets, most of the time you use her super when an enemy's behind a wall, so you don't really get much value. Like, she's a tank counter, so anybody that gets caught in the slow is pretty much screwed anyways. So I really never see anybody get any value from this Hypercharge, so I'm going to put it in the weak. I'm going to put it below Darryl's. I think this one's terrible. Next up, we have Stu's Hypercharge, which is mutation, and it's very strong. Very, very strong. It does take a while to get to it, but infinite super for 5 seconds, that's infinite mobility with 0 drag, or infinite heals with gas a heal for 5 seconds. Now, it does take a while to cycle through, like I said, but still, one Hypercharge can easily change the game in your favor. So it's definitely a top meta Hypercharge. I'll put it at the bottom of it. Next up, we have Piper's Hypercharge Boppin'. It takes like little to no time to cycle through, and it turns Piper from a sniper into an assassin, because what you can do is you can super, if anybody gets close to you, you can super them, drop some nukes on them, then super into another enemy, knock them back, auto aim like 2 shots, and you're dealing like 4k damage a shot. So the stat boost you get for Piper is absolutely insane. And this is also another one that I think is easily in the top meta. So I'm actually going to put it there above Rico. This is a really good hypercharge. Next up, we have Frank's Hypercharge, Seismic Smash. I think this one's a little bit overrated. When everybody thought this Hypercharge came out, they were like, oh my god, Frank's going to completely break the game. This Hypercharge is very strong because it takes little to no time to cycle through, and it's almost guaranteed to hit if the enemy's not too far away. But at the same time, Frank's still vulnerable while using this super, and it does open up a lot of the map, which sometimes can hurt Frank, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter because he's just going to team wipe if he gets the whole team caught in a super. So it's easily got to be in at least top meta Hypercharge. Once again, I know I'm throwing a lot of Hypercharges up there, but I'm going to throw it up here. I'm going to throw it right above Barley's. Next up, we got BB's Hypercharge. BB's Hypercharge is really strong as well. It takes little to no time to cycle. It's a little bit more predictable because you really can't get the value from the walls if you have it lined up how you want. Either way, though, it's just I don't know. Like, I think it's definitely going to go in above. I don't think it's like a top meta Hypercharge because BB's kind of fallen off a little bit. But it's an above average one. Next up, we've got Nani's Hypercharge. It's one of the worst Hypercharges in the game. I'm so sorry, Nani. You got a terrible Hypercharge. It takes a while to cycle through, and it does nothing. All it does is makes Peep bigger, and I see no difference. Most of the time, I don't even get the Hypercharge in the game anyways, so I don't like this one at all. Easily an F tier for me. It's one of the worst in the game without a question. Next up, we've got Edgar's Hypercharge, and I don't know. I'm debating to put this one in the broken Hypercharge category because one Edgar Hypercharge can easily team wipe the whole team if you have no counters to it. But I wouldn't say it's completely broken anymore because Edgar is still pretty easy to counter in the right matchup. Now, if he's got a field day matchup, he is just going to completely eat, and this Hypercharge saves him a lot. So it's definitely top meta. I'll put it right below Dynamix because Dynamix is really strong as well. Gale has another top meta Hypercharge. I wouldn't say it's completely broken because it did get nerfed, and so did his super damage. So you can't just brainlessly spam his super and kill like the whole team every single time. Like, you still can, but you have to pray they're grouped up. And the damage isn't substantial, and it takes a lot longer to cycle. It takes 4 supers, but I don't care. It's still easily a top meta Hypercharge. So, next up, you've got Colette's Hypercharge, and Colette's Hypercharge has been nerfed in terms of supercharge rate. It's so broken in Heist, but other than that, it's a little bit harder to cycle through, and Colette does a lot of damage with the super as is, so it's easily still at least an above average Hypercharge. So I'm going to throw it in the B tier right below Jesse's. Next up, we have Belle's Hypercharge. Belle's Hypercharge isn't completely useless, but it's not great because all it does is it makes her super guaranteed to hit an enemy. Well, not even guaranteed because sometimes it can still wrap around the enemy and miss. But either way, it's still a Hypercharge that isn't that great, so I'll put it in weak. I thought at the top of the weak Hypercharge. Next up, we got Maisie's Hypercharge. One that I think is really good. I love Maisie's Hypercharge because the amount of team wipe potential with this Hypercharge is so good. It does take a little bit more time to cycle because of that supercharge rate nerf she got a while ago. But good Maisie players know how to hit shots pretty consistently. I'm actually a decent Maisie player, and I get this Hypercharge like twice a game. And it's almost a team wipe all the time because she deals a lot of damage now. So I would say it's an above average Hypercharge. I'm going to put it at the top of it. Next, we got Pearl's Hypercharge. It's terrible. We don't need to talk about it. Easily one of the worst in the game. Next up, we have Angelo's Hypercharge. Angelo's Hypercharge is kind of just like, it's good because like his super follows him, and anything aggressive really can't go onto Angelo because he's not only going to get damaged from his arrow, but he's also going to take damage from his poison. But also, he gets poison shots every single time. He's super easy to hit shots with because of how fast he is, so he can just run up to a brawler, auto aim, run back. You're pretty much never going to catch him. But the only problem with it is it takes a while to cycle through, and I think that's the biggest downgrade. But honestly, I think it's a pretty average Hypercharge. I'll put it right in the center of the C tier. Next up, we got Mortis's Hypercharge. It's easily one of the best Hypercharges in the game. It's absolutely broken. Why the heck does it give him such a big damage boost? The fact that you can just spam this super relentlessly and team wipe with ease. With absolute ease. Like, this Hypercharge is brain dead. It makes Mortis from a skillful brawler into a pretty easy brawler to play with this Hypercharge. It's absolutely broken. It needs another nerf. Next up, we've got Terra's Hypercharge. Another one that I think is a little bit under the radar. We don't really talk about this Hypercharge. It is massive, and it destroys a lot of terrain, which I think is a really good thing for Terra, because she can pretty much control the map how she likes, and you can't miss a super. You can't do it. But it does, Terra Super does take a while to cycle, but it's every other super she gets her Hypercharge. So I would put it like at the bottom of the B tier. Next up, we have Jean's Hypercharge. Jean's Hypercharge is awful. Like, it completely contradicts how Jean works because you don't really want to pull in multiple enemies, and also just the fact that it pulls in enemies quicker than its normal super is also a bit of a downgrade because the way you play Jean is you pull a Brawler, and then you start chipping away at its health, and if you need to, you use the knockback gadget, if you're using it, to push them back to put them in an even bigger stun lock. But with this Hypercharge, it really contradicts that. So I just think it's a weak Hypercharge. So I put it like towards the bottom. Next up, we have Max's Hypercharge. It's easily still a broken Hypercharge, in my opinion. The team synergy is extremely insane, and the fact that you can give yourself and your teammates super is crazy, and the stat buffs are really good, and the speed is unbearable. Like, how the hell are you going to hit this? Next up, we've got Sprout, and unfortunately, Sprout still has a terrible Hypercharge. One of the worst in the game, easily still. It's awful, completely useless. Next up, we got Ruff's Hypercharge. It's easily the most broken Hypercharge in the game, in my opinion. Without a doubt, the fact that you can throw down a Hypercharge super that your teammate can pick up, and Brawlers like in the S tier, A tier, or Brawlers that have really strong Hyperchargers that take a long time to cycle, for example, like Gale, or even Edgar, that take a long time to cycle, you can give them a free Hypercharge. And if they just use their Hypercharge, there's another Hypercharge for you. Now it doesn't charge the super, but that's easy. Like, the Brawler will probably be close to super. And the fact that you can give a Brawler a free Hypercharge, that is absolutely broken. Like, especially like a Brawler like Buzz, where he can get his Hypercharge, use his gadget, and immediately go into Spider-Man mode. That is absolutely broken. Like, what? This is absurdly broken, in my opinion. That's easily an S tier. Next up, we've got Squeak's Hypercharge. I have this one, and I actually think this one's it's not as bad as what people say, because sure, it's a little inconsistent with the second bounce, but at the same time, you can control a lot of the map, and it's not that hard. It's every 2.5 supers you get this Hypercharge, and Squeak's pretty easy to charge up super because his shots are so big, and he does deal a decent amount of damage. So this is one that I think is a little bit under the radar. I would say it's just like an average Hypercharge. Next up, we have Lou's Hypercharge. It's easily still a top meta Hypercharge. It's really the reason Lou is such a good brawler. The fact that you can just throw your super down, instantly freeze the brawler, and pretty much guarantee the kill every single time, and then even cycle to a second one, is very strong. Now, it has been nerfed because the supercharge rate was nerfed, but it doesn't matter. It's still easily a top-tier meta Hypercharge, so I'll put it right in the center of it. Next up, we have Buzz's Hypercharge. Buzz has a very, very good Hypercharge. It's super strong. The fact that he can turn into Spider-Man and pretty much warp around the map and then pretty much kill one, if not even two enemies, because you could stun lock one if he's right next to a wall, and then just keep progressing. And it takes little or no time to cycle, and then with a gadget combination as well, that's how you can easily just cycle through. So I think this one's very strong. I'll put it in the bottom of the A tier. I think this is a top meta Hypercharge. Next up, we have Fang's Hypercharge, and Fang's Hypercharge is very strong. It goes through walls and does a lot of damage, but the biggest drawback to this Hypercharge, it takes so long to get. I think it's over 4 supers. Now, with the Ruffs on the team, it's very strong, but without a Ruffs, you're getting one, if any, a Hypercharge in the game, and it can be very hard to cycle through it. So, like, it's still a good Hypercharge, but I think right now it's a little bit on the weaker side, so I'm just going to give it average, just because it takes so long to cycle, and Fang is not very good in the meta. Next up, we've got Otis's Hypercharge, and Otis's Hypercharge cycles pretty quickly. I just don't see a point in this Hypercharge, because all it does is it stuns the enemy, which makes a kill that you're probably going to get 95% of the time anyways into a 100% time. So, because they can't run away. The only down back to Otis's super is the Brawler can still run, but majority of the time, you use Otis super on an aggro Brawler, because Otis is designed to counter those aggressive comps and not really good against long range. So, and it's kind of challenging to hit Otis' super at maximum range. Now, if you can hit it at maximum range, they will still run away from you. That's why you kind of use it on an aggro Brawler. You don't really run Otis into 3 sharpshooters. Like, you don't do it. Otis does have a lot of range, but I don't know. I don't really see a point in this Hypercharge, so I'm going to put it in the E tier, like right. Let's put it in the top of the E tier. Next up, we have Charlie's Hypercharge. I don't think it's complete. Yeah, it's got to be completely useless, and here's why. Charlie's gotten so many nerfs to the Spider's gadget and to her base kit overall. It takes her 7 shots to get her super, which is already a long time, and she does get it every 1.67 supers. But all it does is it spawns 3 spiders, and the Spider's gadget dies pretty much instantly now in these metas, so I just don't think this hypercharge gives any value anymore. Maybe if it adds a couple more spiders, we'll see it rise a little bit. But for right now, I think it's easily enough to your Brawler. Charlie's not good on the meta whatsoever. Next up, you have Miko's hypercharge. Another one that I think is completely terrible. I'll put it, yeah, I gotta put it on the top of the F tier as well. I think this Miko already as a Brawler is not very great in the meta, but his hypercharge sucks because it contradicts the whole point of it. Once you use your super, his hypercharge timer will run out. Yes, if you can use it towards the end of his super, it's fine. But at the same time, it's super easy to avoid Miko's stun from his super. And even with the stun, you're pretty much going to kill a Brawler anyways if you land on him. But I don't know. I just don't think this hypercharge is that great because it takes every other super, which is nice. But in metas like this one, it's super easy to avoid Miko, and it's super hard to consistently cycle on supers. So I just think it's absolutely terrible. Next up, we have Spike's hypercharge. Spike has a pretty average hypercharge, I would say. It doesn't take that long to cycle through, but all it does is it makes his super bigger, and that's it. Like that's it. So, like C tier, I think it's a pretty balanced hypercharge. Crow's hypercharge, I feel like is a pretty underrated. Like it's not like a top meta hypercharge, but it's above average because on the high safe, it's really good. Crow is super meta on highs, but it also is super good to confirm at least 1, even 2 kills on a Brawler because the damage output is very, very strong, and he can deal a ton of damage if he gets that right moment. So I will put it in a B tier, like right above Colette, I would say. Next up, we have Leon's hypercharge. Now I don't think it's completely broken anymore, but it has to be at least at the top of the A tier because Leon can team wipe so easily with his hypercharge with that damage buff. It takes 3.5 supers to cycle through, but 1 hypercharge can make it go from a losing situation to easily a winning situation because Leon staying invisible throughout his super is mechanically it's just broken. So next up we have Sandy's hypercharge. One that Sandy's really not that meta anymore, but he still has easily a top meta hypercharge because the fact that he can give his whole team a speed boost just makes it pretty much impossible to counter Sandy for the duration of his super / hypercharge, and he can cycle through another super, and it takes 2.5 supers to cycle, and it's meta. It's really strong. So I'll put it like I would say above Penny's. Next up we have Surge's hypercharge, level 5, and this is a pretty good hypercharge as well. It's really good for just pushing the enemy back. Now it only lasts during the duration of his super, but the fact that he has so much range and his shots split, it just reminds me of Surge when he first came out because his shots would split no matter what with that star power. And it doesn't take that long to cycle through. I think he can get it. He gets it before he even can reach stage 4. So it's really good on Surge. So I think this is another one that makes him. And Surge is really strong on the meta right now. So I think this is another top meta hypercharge. I would easily put it probably towards the bottom of it. I don't think it's as good. So I'll put it right below Rico's. And lastly, we have Cordelius' hypercharge. Another one that's kind of similar to a Brawler like Otis, because if you put a Brawler into the Shadow Realm, you could either just run away or just confirm the kill. And Cordelius, when he puts a Brawler in the Shadow Realm, can confirm a kill, I would say about 80% of the time. Now, it's not a guarantee like Otis' super, because Cordelius can still die in a 1v1. He doesn't have the craziest amount of damage output, but the biggest benefit is he can't make their enemy Brawler use their super, which, and Cordelius doesn't have the range, but at least he has a gadget with very good mobility where he can just hop over a wall, then super, and pretty much confirm the kill every single time. And he has the damage star power, the combo stream, which does help him. It does take a while to cycle through it, but at least putting the Brawler in the Shadow Realm pretty much guarantees the kill, because either he's faster than normal and the enemy is slowed. How are you going to kill him? You're just not. So I would say this is probably just an average hypercharge, so I'll put it like right in the center. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, anything I probably should have shuffled around. But that's kind of it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.